Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's very exciting event with Adam Figman, who is Slam Magazine's editor-in-chief. Adam, how are you?
Good. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. There's a lot of excitement among our audience, which is PR professionals. We have 45 minutes today. What we're going to go ahead and do is some moderated Q&A back and forth and then take some audience follow-up questions. So with that, let's just jump right into it. Can you tell us about yourself and your professional background?
Yeah, sure. I graduated Lehigh University with a degree in journalism in 2010. Kind of a pretty rough job market at the time, especially in the journalism world. So I literally walked into a unpaid internship in 2010 and then at Slam Magazine, and I liked it a lot. I stayed. I basically told myself I was going to stay until they would give me a job. And a few months passed, and then sometime in early 2011, they did give me a job. I was editorial assistant, I believe was my first title, and freelance writer also. And then I kind of worked through it. I was editorial assistant, associate editor, senior editor, and then in 2016, I was basically second in command editorially, but there was nowhere to go but the top spot, and it didn't seem like that was opening anytime soon. So I left, went to work for a media company called Cycle, which was a great experience. And, I had a great time there, worked on some really cool stuff. But about somewhere between a month and maybe 6 or 7 weeks of being there, I got a call from my old friends at Slam saying that the editor-in-chief job was actually about to open up. The former editor-in-chief of Slam was moving on to Bleacher Report, so I actually came back a few weeks after that to have the title of editor-in-chief at Slam. That was about a year ago at this time, maybe a couple months earlier. So it's been about 14 or 15 months since I've been an editor-in-chief of Slam, and I've been here since.
Wow, so it's been a journey. Now, back in 2010, when you joined, when you were an intern, was there a sense that the sky was falling, the media was falling apart, or how were things different back then versus right now, the way you see it, the media environment?
Possibly. At the time, I was so green and so wide-eyed that I didn't see it, but I'm sure on the business side that they were thinking that, or they were seeing it. I know that between like 2008 and 2011 were really rough years for just the print journalism industry, and then I think the falling apart kind of slowed down a little bit after that. At least, like a ton of magazines closed over those few years. So I was kind of entering the industry at that time. From my perspective, I remember being pretty excited about the whole thing, to be honest with you, not because the industry was falling apart, but because the digital world was emerging. And from my perspective, it was like, okay, let me learn all the ins and outs of social media. Let me learn all the ins and outs of the internet, our website, which had 1 or 2 people working on it, but less than the magazine. And let me figure this out, because there's like now this whole opportunity, and companies or brands like Slam needed people with some digital savvy to work in the digital space. So for me, it was an opportunity, but for a lot of people, I would say, yeah, I'm sure there was that kind of fear that the ground was falling in, or the sky was falling, or however you want to put it.
Sure. And you mentioned the digital side. Obviously, Slam is a magazine, and then on top of that, like 99% of media companies today, you have a digital component as well. Can you walk us through Slam Magazine's team? So full-time folks, freelancers, your digital folks. It would just be interesting to get a feel for, your teammates.
For sure. I'll preface this by saying at this point, literally the entire team works on digital, social, and print. We don't really have anyone who's walled off into any of those sectors. I'm editor-in-chief. I'm kind of the head of content, work on the bigger projects like the cover shoots and some of our bigger video shoots. But I'm also in all the branded content meetings that we have, and branded content pitches, and also just generally overseeing the entire operation. We have a managing editor who handles a lot of the internal back-end stuff, a lot of administration stuff, a lot of just team management, but also works on the magazine, also helps us editorially on that side, helps lay out some of the stuff in print. We have a creative director who lays out everything, designs the whole magazine, but she's also working on a redesign of our website, also works on social media graphics, anything graphically that we need designed, she's there for. I have a senior editor who kind of manages the digital team on a more day-to-day, hour-to-hour basis. And then we kind of split up our editors into beats. So we have someone whose main focus is sneakers, someone whose main focus is high school and college, someone whose main focus is news, mostly on the NBA side, and then a general social media editor who's relatively new to the team, who does all stuff across Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, Snapchat, etc. So that's basically the full-time team right there. Then we have a part-time news writer who helps with news posts, and we're probably adding a couple of those as the season gets going because we need news writers for the nighttime while games are happening. And then we have freelance writers, freelance photographers, and freelance videographers all across the country. So there's a pretty big network of freelancers that we have all over too. So I'd say the editorial team is about, I lost count in there, but it's about 9 or so at this point.
Okay.
Full-timers, and then a group of freelancers that are that extend all throughout the country and even the world at this point.
You know, you mentioned branded content, and it would be great to revisit that. But on the social side, considering the topic you're covering and the passion that your team probably has for it, as well as the audience, you guys must have very, very engaging socials now.
Yeah, absolutely. We see it on Instagram if we post a caption with a question or something along those lines, anything even remotely controversial, the comments rack up. We see it on Twitter. Basically, Twitter and Instagram is, I think, where we see just a ton of engagement. But yeah, our audience skews pretty young, and people love debating basketball things. So it's like, we say that social media in 2017 is the new barbershop, where it's just where people come to argue about sports, and especially basketball. There's always just been these, when people put basketball into historical context and who's top 5 of all time, who's better, this guy or that guy, who would you take to start a team, this guy or that guy, like those arguments go on forever. So, and we benefit off of it, to be honest with you.
And I'm assuming you guys enjoy it.
Yeah, we love it. I mean, it's great. The truth is it's totally organic and it's totally authentic to what we do. If you hang out in our office, you can't really get through, not even in full day, but let alone like a morning, without hearing some sort of basketball argument break out amongst the staff members. So yeah, I mean, it's who we are.
And as you mentioned, you cover kicks, you cover sneakers, high school and college. Now, as far as high school and college, you mentioned that you have a person that focuses on it. Now, what makes a story on the high school level, or college level is a little different, but especially before college, what makes a story compelling enough to warrant slam coverage or a write-up?
It starts with how good the kid is, to be honest with you. There's just not much of an interest for a player who's not top whatever in the country. Usually it's like top 20 to 50, somewhere in that range is as low as we'll go. If a kid has a really amazing story, but he's top 300 or something, he might never make the pages or the website of Slam, to be honest with you. So that's kind of the first hurdle. And then beyond that, it's what their background is. The same things that kind of go into any piece of editorial, whether it's what's compelling about it. Do they have an interesting family? Do they come from an interesting place? Do they have an interesting style of play? Are they doing something fascinating at the high school basketball level with their team, with their friends, on social media? All that stuff kind of plays into it. But yeah, for us, the first hurdle is he or she good at basketball on a level where people are going to care about them for the remainder of their career, whether it's recruiting them into college and then someday earning a spot into the NBA. So that's kind of the first step, and then we take it from there.
Now, you guys have great coverage of just the shoe culture and collaborations and so many other things. I noticed that Slam Magazine covered the Jordan brand, as it should, and it's the opening of the first Jordan store in Canada. Do you think that brand is the secret just that it's Michael Jordan, or are they doing something different from everybody else?
That's a good start to have Michael Jordan. I mean, the thing with Jordan brand is that they were first, right? They were the first brand to kind of be a part of this cultural revolution in the, I mean, 80s into the 90s, where where basketball became this mainstream force and culture and basketball kind of collided. And at the center of that all was Michael Jordan. You could argue that Michael was just happened to be there and just happened to be the best player in basketball at the time. Or you could argue that Michael's personality and his game and his style of play and his aura, that they all made that stuff happen. It's kind of hard to say. It's like a chicken and egg situation. But the fact that he was first, that he kind of set the tone for the entire industry, means that exactly to your point, that's the advantage. Like you can't compete with that for someone like a LeBron or a Kobe or a Russell Westbrook or a Kawhi Leonard. Like, these guys are all amazing basketball players. They all have cultural movements going on behind them in some form or fashion. But Mike's brand is hard to compete with on any level, just because he was first to, have the signature line the way that he did, and to be a part of all of this. So that's really the true advantage for Jordan Brand, and that's kind of hard to top. That's why, you saw it with Kobe, and we'll see it with LeBron someday soon. But as these guys kind of establish these legacy brands after they leave the NBA, I don't know if anyone will be able to do it on a level of Jordan, just because he was able to establish himself so heavily into the industry because of how early they were. So yeah, it'll be interesting. I'm not really sure where it'll go. I'm not sure if a LeBron or a Kobe or whoever's next will be able to do it like that, or do it even on a bigger scale. Of course, anything is possible, but there's just a very inherent advantage in Michael being first.
There's an article up on your site titled Sneaker Week Portland Recap, and obviously go into everything that happened there. Now, for any event folks listening in who are organizing, because obviously sneaker culture, as you know, has taken off, and there's so many amazing events going on, and it's almost like Comic-Con, but in its own way. But for any folks listening in with interesting events that fit that sneaker cultural, or what do they need to know about hoping to possibly get coverage in that vertical or that section of your site?
Just doing interesting things, to be honest. I mean, it's very case by case. In our situation, we're able to kind of look at every invite that we get, every PR opportunity that we get, and say, this feels like something Slam should be covering, or this feels like something that we can pass on. In the case of Sneaker Week, there were some events there where some brands did some stuff that some smaller brands based out of Portland did some stuff that have worked with us in the past, so we have familiarity there. There were some speakers who spoke who have been Slam writers and worked with us in the past. One of the guys who reached out on the communication side is actually a friend of mine, so there was a familiarity there. And to be honest, that always helps in any capacity, whether if there's an established relationship and something that you can bring into the table on that front, or that you're working with someone that has some sort of Slam connection. Obviously, that kind of thing is going to have us poke our head up a little quicker because there's more familiarity. But truthfully, yeah, it's what brands are you working with? What talent are you working with? Are there players involved that Slam has interest in? Are you moving the needle in any interesting way? And for us, if the answer is yes to basically any of those questions, or there's a notable answer to any of those questions, we will pay attention to it.
Approximately how many PR pitches are you and your colleagues receiving, or just yourself? You don't know the answer for all your colleagues, but how many PR pitches are you receiving on a weekly basis, approximately?
A lot, honestly. Blindly, probably a few hundred that just pop into the inbox that probably aren't even meant for me or aren't addressed specifically to me. From people that we're familiar with, from people who we know or have relationships with, it's closer to the dozens. And those are more manageable and things that we try to handle or take care of or cover in some way. But yeah, the short answer is if you're just counting any PR pitch that comes in, it's a ton. It's an unmanageable number.
Fair enough. And are these mainly in the sports category, apparel, or just all over the place because you're huge and they assume maybe they have a chance? Or your publication is the first sports publication that we've had on. We had so much interest because in addition to folks working in PR, they, of course, love what you are covering. But it's very interesting. I'm just curious, like, how much of it is, let's say, the game and how much of it is other stuff?
Yeah, I would say it's very heavily other stuff. Training materials, dietary stuff, apparel, sneakers, all stuff like that. There's a ton of stuff where I won't even get, 2 seconds into the email because I immediately know what it is. We get a lot of, every time a player gets injured, PR representatives reach out on behalf of doctors who want us to interview them about the injury. And to be honest, I have zero interest in doing anything like that at Slam. That just to me is a little skeevy. And it just always kind of rubs me the wrong way of taking advantage of players' injuries by earning or trying to earn press off the strength of players' injuries. That I was never really into that, and we get a lot of those. And there's a lot of dietary stuff, nutrition stuff, training stuff, and sometimes that stuff makes sense, but a lot of times the pitches aren't bringing anything interesting to the table beyond like, here's the thing you can do, you can take, you can eat, you can drink, you can shoot around with that will make you a better basketball player. And at this point, you kind of need a better angle than just that because that's what, everyone else is saying. So there's a ton of those that just don't make it past the cutting room floor because the entire pitch is, here's a way to get better at basketball, which for what we do, that means that, we're just getting tons and tons of emails that are saying the same thing. So whether there's different ways to kind of, distance yourself from that kind of thing and sound a little more interesting and sound like you have a better opportunity. But yeah, there's definitely a significant number of pitches that, to be honest with you, we just don't take seriously because they're all so similar to one another.
The folks listening here, plus the recording later on YouTube, what advice would you give them so they don't make that mistake and so they don't sound like everybody else in your inbox?
Well, for starters, personalize it. We want to see, I think every editor wants to see a PR pitch that's directed specifically at them and not at, not just a generic greeting that looks like it was sent to 6,000 people at the same time. And also it's knowing a little bit about what we do here and what kind of stuff we would cover. If you know anything about Slam, you know that we're a basketball publication, but you also know that we are a basketball culture publication and we cover sports and basketball in a pretty specific way. And just a couple of sentences explaining why you think it works for Slam as opposed to just why you think it's the next big, great thing can go a long way. So that's what I would recommend.
Basketball is obviously cyclical. It's on schedule. How much do you follow an editorial calendar?
We used to follow it a little bit stricter, to be honest with you, but we still do. We publish a certain number of print issues per year, and we kind of have them circled in advance where it's like, here's an NBA preview issue. Here's an issue that's going to drop around All-Star game. Here's going to be a lead into the playoffs. Here's going to be a champions issue celebrating whoever wins the finals. So we do that on the print side. On the digital and social side, we'll gear up for opening night. We'll gear up for the playoffs. We'll gear up for the All-Star game. It's kind of similar, but in our business, there's never, if you follow a calendar too strictly, I think you inevitably end up hurting yourself. We need to be very fluid. We need to be able to be ready for some sort of news dropping that changes everything at the drop of a dime. And we're also reactionary. I mean, what happens in the game will affect the social coverage, will affect the editorial coverage, will affect everything. So we also kind of watch the games and pay close attention, and then either that night or the next day or the next week make decisions based off that. So we can't be too strict with the planning because we have to be fluid based on what's going on out there.
But that must be a great luxury in a way now versus the way it was back in the day, in the sense that you can adapt. You have the digital, you have video, you have obviously long form, you have so many different tools at your disposal.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, once upon a time before my era, the finals would end on June 22nd or somewhere around there, and our next issue would come out sometime around August August 8th, and it would have the champions on it. So I think it's safe to say that by August 8th, everyone knew who the champions were. But now we can do, a huge digital social celebration not even the next day, 10 minutes after Game 7 ends. And then if we want to have something that we want to stand the test of time and to be a little more permanent and kind of elevate the champion on a different level, we still do those champions covers or the print magazine covers that we think kind of last a little bit longer than your average Instagram post or your average tweet. There's just a sense of permanence with a magazine cover. So we still do those kind of things, and print to us kind of represents this thing that can last a little bit longer. You're not going to throw away a magazine potentially. You might hold on to it for a long time. You might put the pictures on your wall if you're a kid. You might frame the cover if it's special to you. So we still do that print coverage, which is slower and which is a little more, I guess, grandiose, if you will. But you're right, like the ability to cover our world digitally and socially is an advantage, and it makes it more fun, to be honest with you.
I just pulled up some traffic info on your site. It's approximate, but approximately speaking, 2/3 of your audience digitally, at least on the site, is U.S. And then you have, other countries which love basketball, like the Philippines, Australia, Canada, and even China. And how much do you cater to these foreign audiences, or are you just writing for an American audience and anyone else who comes, that's just a nice benefit?
Yeah, I think that's more along the lines of what we're doing. I mean, the truth is the foreign audience, and we have huge fan bases, as you said, in the Philippines and overseas, that they're looking for, when they come to us, I think they're looking for American coverage. They're looking for what it's like to be at the games, what it's like to talk to the players, the interviews, all of that stuff. So we don't really need to tailor it to a specific foreign audience or do anything like that. They come to us for our almost local coverage or, our American coverage, and they enjoy it. And we're grateful and very happy to have the foreign audience. I think it speaks to the kind of the brand of Slam that people overseas are looking for a basketball brand to follow, and they turn to us. But we don't really need to tailor the coverage to them in any sort of way. We can kind of just do our thing, and they pay attention to it.
Right. That makes perfect sense. And what can you tell us about the Slam podcast?
The Slam podcast is something that we do in our office. I'm actually sitting in the room where it's recorded right now. We don't do it too regularly. It's I guess, we used to do it a little bit more regularly. I'm not even on it that much myself. Our senior editor is the host. But for us, it's a good way for when athletes make themselves available to come into the office, or we're in touch with someone in PR or a manager, an agent, something like that, where, we get a chance to spend some time with a player. And instead of, a quick interview for the website or a quick interview for the magazine, the podcast is just a chance to really dive into someone's story. You get either anywhere from 30 to 70 minutes of audio. So there's more stories, especially some of the basketball players. A lot of them have fascinating backgrounds. They have interesting stories. So for us, it's kind of a way to dive into that, just in a different format. So yeah, we don't do it extremely often. I would say we record one either every week or every couple of weeks based on the opportunities. But it is a good way for us to kind of give our audience a different media offering than we had previously.
Definitely, and it sounds like a great way to grow sort of an additional audience that likes that long-form conversation or whatever you want to call it.
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure.
What's your opinion about the PR machinery behind the Big Baller brand?
I am not against it whatsoever. I think that, LeVar, when you say Big Baller brand, I think people really mean LeVar Ball at this point, has used the media machine, the news cycle, social media, digital media, to his advantage. And he said, look, I'm going to start my own thing. I'm going to use my access to my audience, which I have straight on digital, in the digital space, on social media, on websites and all that. And I'm going to, sell people products instead of having my sons endorse somebody else's product. And the truth is, the real driving force behind that is social. Lonzo has, I don't know, I think 1 point something million or 2 million Instagram followers. LaMelo has, I think he's up to like 2.6 million. I think LiAngelo's at 1 point something. So all in, there's many millions of followers just on Instagram. So essentially you can, these kids can tell their own stories through their products. They can design their own products if they're interested in that. They don't need to go to a Nike or an Adidas or an Under Armour and have their products designed for them, have their stories told for them. So they've bypassed that process to a degree. Has he stepped over the line on the PR front once or twice? For sure. And, whether it's a smart business move or if he should take the money from Nike and run, or should have taken, I don't think at this point that's even an option, but at some point I'm sure it was, if he should have just had Lonzo sign with Nike and taken that money and shut down the big baller brand and call it, make a few million right there and call it a day. I don't know. I don't see their books. I don't know exactly how many hoodies they've sold, how many sneakers they've moved. That's a bigger question. I think that you would need a lot of financial transparency to learn about. But as for just telling the story and just using the available PR machinery of the, this digital space in 2017 from that perspective, I think it's brilliant.
And let's be honest, we live in a world where the PR machinery is being played all the time. These guys are playing it. The Kardashians are playing it. The president is playing it. So, say what you want, but it works.
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's take a few audience questions here. The first one is very general, which is, what attracted you to basketball?
Well, I played it growing up, not very well, but, after school and with friends and that kind of thing. And I just always loved the sport. I played fantasy basketball. I studied box scores. I was obsessed with the culture. I had Tracy McGrady Adidas advertisements on my wall as a kid. Like I was invested in this. So I can't really speak to why, but I've just always been into it. And so when I graduated school and wasn't really sure what I wanted to do, had a journalism degree and was kind of figuring it out, the opportunity to work 2 days a week for free just in the back room of a basketball magazine, it was like, yeah, hell yeah, why not? I'll do this. And if I figure out something else to do while I'm at this internship, then all the better. But if not, I'm at least like having fun. I'm in a world that I enjoy, and I'll take it from there. So that's kind of how where my interest lies.
And what an inspiring climb from intern to editor-in-chief. So
thank you.
You're welcome. We have another question asking, just to quickly summarize, where is Slam heading? Where do you see Slam over the next few years? How will the publication evolve?
Well, from a format perspective, we're keeping the magazine alive, but I don't think anyone in the media space would say the future of their business or brand is in print media. What we're doing now is we're really spending time and even money to invest into our social coverage and our video coverage of the sport. So obviously from our perspective, that doesn't mean highlights from games because the NBA handles that, but it's player profiles. We hope to set up some video series that we think our audience is going to really be into. But it's really turning Slam into a multi-platform, multimedia machine, which I think it's already been in the works for a while now, but it's ramping that up to the next level so that everybody that likes basketball to any degree, whether you're a hardcore fan or a casual fan, following Slam on your social channels or picking up the magazine or stopping by the website, those become more essential parts of your life as opposed to maybe just something that you just check here and there now. So that's kind of our goal. And yeah, it's just a multi-platform play, and that's it.
Speaking of that multi-platform play, We have a question about your Instagram. Your Instagram is obviously very successful, and it's something the kids and just your entire audience clearly loves based on the numbers and the reactions. What is your approach do you have a unique approach to Instagram?
I don't think it's super unique, but I do think for us, what we think about a lot with Instagram is how can we, and this wasn't always, this is more of a recent conversation in our office. It's how can we offer something on Instagram that isn't the same thing that you're going to see in everybody else's feeds? Because in the basketball world, when one highlight or a certain, whether it's a kid dunking on another kid in a driveway or an NBA player dunking on another NBA player, these things go viral and you see them on 60 feeds. If you're a basketball fan and you follow a few different basketball feeds, you might see the same thing 35 times in a row. And I don't think there's anything wrong with delivering things to your audience that they want, but I think for us it's also, okay, how can we build on that and do things that nobody else is doing in that space, and how can we do things that we feel are specific to Slam and the culture around basketball? So it's a lot of, it's a lot of portrait stuff and photos and older videos and newer videos, but it's also, it's the sneakers, it's the music, it's the gear. For us, we try to really mix it's a high school coverage that we do. We try to really mix everything in so that when you're on our Instagram page or, you see whether you just see a post scrolled through your feed or you actually hop over to our page and you kind of take it all in, you say, okay, this isn't just one thing. This isn't just a highlight feed. This isn't just a basketball, a specific kind of basketball feed. It's the culture around the game. It's everything that Slam does personified in a social feed. So we want you to feel like you're getting a Slam experience through our feed.
And you mentioned music. Can you just elaborate on music?
Oh, absolutely. Yes. For us, when we talk about culture, the culture of the game, we've mentioned sneakers, we've mentioned apparel, but music is hugely part of it. I mean, there's the forever saying that all rappers want to be basketball players and all basketball players want to be rappers, or all athletes want to be musicians and all musicians want to be athletes. And, we've always thought, we see that all the time. So about a year ago, we devoted an entire issue to music. We called it the music issue. Damian Lillard was on the cover, and we still cover that world entirely. So it's a lot of crossover between the two. If there's a musical artist or a rapper or a band that's super into hoops and they're at a game, we might post that photo on our Instagram, or we run an interview with a rapper in every issue and that kind of thing. So there's a ton of crossover when the guys are into music. Like Victor Oladipo put out an album last week, and we were in the studio with him and did a video profile about his music and his R&B. I don't know if you call it a career, but his R&B album. And we've covered Dame Lillard's music pretty thoroughly. So for us, whenever there is that crossover, we really try to hop all over it, because to me, at least, that signifies the culture around the game just as well as anything. It's the idea that these guys are into music, into just more than just, they don't wake up and play basketball for 24 hours and go back to sleep, or play basketball for 18 hours and go back to sleep. They're into hobbies, and the main hobby is often music. I know for me, same thing. So we just like to cover these guys as people and as individuals, a lot of them love music. So as a result, we end up covering a lot of music stuff, and there's a lot of crossover there for us.
That's great to hear, and it's such a, holistic, it's an interesting approach where you have the apparel, you have the music, and then you have the game, and then you have other things. And you're right, it's looking at sort of what the players are into, what just culture is about. It's very interesting. And as you mentioned, if you go to any green room anywhere else, you'll see athletes. Now, are they going to discuss it the next day? Probably not, but that's how it goes. Adam, it's been a pleasure to speak with you. There was a lot of audience interest. I think part of that was professional, and part of that was they love the game and they love what you guys do, and that's obviously to your credit. But I just want to thank you for all the insights that you've provided today. And have a good afternoon. Thanks again, and a big thank you to our audience.
Thanks so much. Take care.
Take care.